Have you ever looked at someone who was doing wrong and wondered, why does nothing happen to them? Have you ever worked honestly, lived carefully, and still watched life feel unfair while those around you seem to gain more by cutting corners? Have you ever felt that perhaps God is not watching, that perhaps the universe does not care about what is right and what is wrong? If you have ever felt that way, even for a single moment, then this story was made for you. Because this is not just a story about one village and one well. This is a story about the invisible law that governs every human life. The law that does not sleep, does not forget, and does not make exceptions for anyone. This is the story of what happens when a man convinces himself that he is clever enough to outsmart God, and what it cost him, and what it taught an entire community about the true nature of justice and mercy. Watch until the very end. Because the most powerful part of this story is not the punishment. It is what comes after. In a land where the sky was wide and the earth was dry, there existed a small village nestled between two hills. The people there were not wealthy. They did not have rivers nearby or springs beneath their feet. What they had was a single well, dug generations ago by the hands of their ancestors who believed that when people work together, God provides. And he did. That well had never run dry. Through every hot summer, through every season of little rain, through every hardship that came and went, the well remained. It was not just a source of water. It was the heartbeat of the entire community. Families gathered there in the early mornings. Children made friendships there while waiting. Elders resolved disputes nearby. The well was proof that some things still belonged to everyone equally, proof that God's gifts were never meant for just one person. The village had a code that was never written down but was understood by all. The well belongs to no one and to everyone. You take what your family needs. You leave the rest for your neighbor. This code had held for decades, and then one man decided it no longer applied to him. He was not a poor man. He had more than most. His house was solid, his animals were healthy, and his field was wider than his neighbor's. But something lived inside him, a restless, hungry voice that whispered, "It is still not enough." When he saw another family's field giving good harvest, that voice grew louder. When a neighbor came home with new animals, that voice turned bitter. He had confused gratitude with weakness. He believed that wanting more was not greed. It was ambition. He believed that God helps those who help themselves, even if helping themselves means taking from others. One night, when the moon was pale and the village had gone to sleep, he walked to the well alone. He stood there for a long moment, looking in every direction. The streets were empty. The windows were dark. No one was watching. He told himself what every person tells themselves before they do something they know is wrong. No one will notice. It is just a little. I have a family to feed. I have crops that need water. Surely God understands my situation. He lowered the bucket, again and again, and he carried the water silently through the dark to his field. His field drank deeply that night while the village slept, and the well became a little lower. Just a little, just enough that no one would see it immediately. The next morning, the village woke up and went about its routine. Women walked to the well with their clay pots. Children laughed. Old men sat in the shade and spoke of the weather. Everything seemed normal. But under the surface, something had shifted. One bucket taken in darkness always becomes 10 buckets. 10 becomes 100. The man returned the next night, and the night after that. Always in darkness, always with the same quiet justifications running through his mind. Within a few weeks, the water level dropped noticeably. The women who came in the morning began returning home with pots that were not quite full. Children were told to drink less. Farmers noticed their wells for animals were running dry faster than usual. People began gathering in worried clusters, speaking in low voices. Perhaps this is the beginning of a drought, they said. Perhaps the rains will not come this season. Perhaps God is testing us. And through all of this, the man stood among his neighbors with a face full of concern. He shook his head at the right moments. He said the right things. He even suggested that the community should pray more. He said these words while knowing exactly what he had done, while knowing that he, and he alone, was the reason his neighbors were going home thirsty. But he had one more thing to show the village besides his false concern. He had his field. While every other farm in the village began to dry, his crops stood tall and green and full of life. Neighbors passed by and stared. Some whispered with admiration, some with confusion. How is his field so alive when ours are dying? What does he know that we do not? Is his land different? Does he have some secret? He heard their whispers. And instead of shame, what he felt was pride. He believed he was smarter than the village. He believed he had outmaneuvered fate. He believed that the darkness of night had kept his secrets safe forever. He did not understand one thing: God does not need light to see. There are moments in life when we are tested not just by what we do in public, but by what we do when we think no one is looking. And there are moments when life places someone in front of us, someone weak, someone desperate, someone in need, and that moment becomes a mirror. It shows us exactly who we are. One afternoon, a knock came at the man's door. He opened it to find an elderly widow standing there. She lived alone with her young grandson. Her son had died years ago, leaving her with nothing but her hands and her faith. She made her living by sewing clothes for others. Her life was simple and hard and honest. That afternoon, her grandson had fallen ill with fever. She had gone to the well that morning but left empty-handed. The line was too long, the water too low, and her turn had never come. So she walked to her neighbor's door. This neighbor. And she asked, very gently, with no anger and no accusation, simply as one human being asking another, "Do you have a little water? My grandson has a fever. Just a little." The man looked at her, and for a moment, just a moment, something stirred inside him, a feeling he recognized but had worked very hard to silence. The feeling that told him he was going too far, that told him there was a line, and this was it. But that feeling lasted only a second, because behind his house were large clay jars filled with water he had stolen, and in his mind, that water was his. He had worked for it, even if the work was done in darkness. He looked at the old woman and said, "I do not have enough. I have my own family to think about." The widow did not argue. She did not raise her voice. She did not curse him. She simply looked at him for a moment with eyes that carried no anger, only exhaustion. And then she said, "May God make things easy for you." And she turned and walked away. Those 6 words, "May God make things easy for you," spoken by a woman with dry lips, going home to a sick child with empty hands. Those words were not a curse. They were not a prayer for his punishment. They were simply the words of someone who had given up on human help and returned her trust entirely to God. But those words followed him inside his house. They sat with him through the afternoon. They were still there when he lay down that night and could not sleep. He pushed them away. He told himself she would be fine. He told himself he had made the right choice. He told himself everything was under control. He did not know that control is an illusion we maintain until life decides to show us otherwise. The days passed. The well gave less and less. The community held meetings. Their faces were drawn and tired. Their voices were careful, as if speaking too loudly might make the situation worse. After long discussion, the elders made a decision. They would try to dig a new well. They chose a spot at the far end of the village where the earth felt different, where the old ones had once said water might be hiding deep below. The next morning, the entire village came together. Men, women, older children, everyone carried tools, everyone hauled soil, everyone worked under a sun that showed no mercy. The man came too. He could not stay away without it looking strange. So he dug alongside his neighbors, slowly, carefully, always keeping his eyes down. The guilt he had pushed away for weeks was rising now like water through cracked earth. It was harder to push down the closer he stood to the people he had wronged. They dug for 7 days. 7 days of burning sun, blistered hands, aching backs, and dry throats. 7 days of hoping, then hoping a little less, then hoping again. On the 7th day, the digging stopped. The earth had nothing to offer. Dry soil all the way down. No water, no relief. People sat at the edge of the empty pit and were quiet for a long time. Then the man's personal reckoning arrived. He woke one morning and walked to his field. What he saw stopped him in place. The crops that had been the envy of the village. The green, lush, impossibly alive field that had made him feel superior to everyone around him, were dead. Every plant, brown and brittle and broken. The leaves had shriveled. The stalks had collapsed. The soil underneath was cracked and strange-smelling. As he moved through the field in disbelief, he saw the insects that had eaten through the roots. He saw the fungus that had spread through the lower stems like a silent disease. Everything he had cheated to protect had died anyway. Ran to the back of his house where he had stored the stolen water in large jars. He pulled back the covers. The smell hit him before he could see anything. The water had turned dark. Thick green growth floated on the surface. Small living things moved through it. The water he had stolen under the cover of darkness. The water he had denied to a sick child. The water for which he had lied to his community and lied to himself. That water had become poison. He stood there for a long time, not moving, not speaking, just standing in the wreckage of the choices he had made. No lightning had come for him. No voice from the sky had spoken his name. No person had pointed at him in the street. God had not sent a storm to punish him. God had simply stepped back and allowed the man's own choices to complete their natural course. The stolen water rotted. The field that greed built collapsed. The pride that deception fed became dust. The invisible law had simply done what it always does. It returned to the sender exactly what had been sent out, in the precise form that would teach the deepest lesson. In that moment, the man understood something no lecture could have given him. He understood it not in his mind but in his bones, in his chest, in the hollow feeling that comes when a person finally stops running from themselves. He had not outsmarted God. He had only delayed his own reckoning, and now it had arrived. And it had brought with it not just loss but something heavier than loss. It had brought clarity. Meanwhile, the village had not given up. Even after the first failure, something in the community refused to be broken. They gathered again. They prayed together. And they decided to dig one more time, a little deeper at the same new spot, because one of the elders had noticed that the earth at the bottom of the pit had felt different on the last day. Slightly cool, slightly dense, as if hiding something. They returned with tools and with faith, and they dug deeper than before. Their hands were already raw. Their bodies were already tired. But they moved with the kind of determination that has nothing to do with confidence and everything to do with trust. They trusted that what they needed was there, even when they could not see it. And then it happened. The soil changed. One man felt it first. The earth under his tools was wet. He called out. Others dropped to their knees. They dug faster, and suddenly the ground gave way and water came rushing upward. Cold, clear, abundant, powerful. The kind of water that makes people fall to their knees not because they are weak but because they are overwhelmed by grace. People stepped back and looked at what had come up from the earth. Some of them wept. Some raised their hands to the sky. Some stood completely still with their mouths open and their eyes full of the kind of light that comes when you have been afraid for a long time, and then the fear suddenly lifts. "Thank you," they said, not to each other, to the one who had always known where the water was hiding and who had waited until the community was ready to receive it. A few days passed. The village began to breathe again. The new well was clean and deep and giving generously. Life was slowly returning to normal. And during those few days, something was happening inside the man that was harder to describe than anything else in this story. He had spent weeks pushing guilt away. Now he had nothing left to push it away with. His field was gone. His stored water was gone. His pride was gone. And in the silence that followed all that loss, the guilt had room to speak, and it said, "You know what you must do." He walked to the village gathering one morning. He looked broken, not just tired or sad, but broken in the specific way that happens when a person finally stops pretending. He stood before everyone. His voice was quiet and unsteady. He said, "I stole the water from the old well. I did it at night when no one was watching. I told myself it was not serious. I told myself God would understand. I lied to you. I watched you suffer while I pretended to share your concern. I closed my door on someone who asked me for help. I was wrong. I know that God saw everything, and what I did has already come back to me." Silence. Some people felt anger rise in their chests. Some remembered their children going to bed thirsty. Some remembered the fear on the faces of the elders. Some remembered the 7 days of digging under the killing sun for a well that turned out to be dry. And they wondered, would we have needed to dig at all if the old well had not been emptied? But then something shifted in the gathering. One of the older members of the community stepped forward. He did not step forward with anger. He stepped forward with the kind of calm that takes a lifetime to develop. He looked at the man and said, "God has already shown you the result of your choices. You lost your crops. You lost your peace. You lost the ability to look your neighbors in the eye. If God himself has allowed you to see your mistake and bring you back to this community, who are we to place ourselves above his mercy and refuse what he has already shown he intends to give?" He turned to face the gathered crowd. He said, "We are people who pray for forgiveness for our own mistakes every day. We ask God to overlook what we have done. We ask God to give us another chance. If we believe he gives that to us, how can we refuse it to someone standing before us broken and asking for the same?" There was a long silence. And then, one by one, people nodded. Not happily, not easily. This was not the nodding of people who had forgotten. It was the nodding of people who had chosen to rise above their own pain because they understood that community is only possible when forgiveness is real, not just spoken. Someone brought the man water. Someone else brought food. No one shouted. No one humiliated him. They chose to forgive. Not for his sake alone, for their own. Because forgiveness is not a gift we give to the person who wronged us. Forgiveness is the gift we give ourselves, so that what was done to us does not become part of who we are. The man's life rebuilt slowly, not quickly, not dramatically, slowly and honestly. He worked, he contributed, he helped others without expecting anything in return. He stopped measuring his life against his neighbors. He stopped listening to the voice that said it is not enough. He began instead to listen to the quieter voice, the one that had always been there but which he had drowned out with ambition. The voice that said, "Be grateful, be honest, be present, be kind," and something remarkable happened. Not because of magic, not because the universe rewarded his good behavior with a grand gesture, but simply because when a person stops trying to take more than they need and starts giving what they genuinely have, life feels lighter. The harvest that came from his field in the following season was modest, but he ate it without shame. And food without shame tastes better than a feast built on lies. Now let me speak to you directly. Because this story is not just about one man and one village in one faraway time. This story is about every one of us. We live in a world that moves very fast, a world where people are constantly comparing, constantly competing, constantly looking for shortcuts. And in that world, it is very easy to begin making small compromises. At first, they feel harmless. It is just this once. No one will know. It is not that serious. I have a family. I have pressure. God understands my situation. But here is what the invisible law teaches us. There is no such thing as a small wrong. Every action you take creates a ripple. Everything you take that is not yours leaves a hollow somewhere. Every lie you tell, even a quiet one, changes something inside you. And over time, those small wrongs accumulate, not as debt that waits to be called in by some external force, but as the quiet erosion of your own peace, your own clarity, your own ability to feel joy. You cannot steal peace from someone else and keep it for yourself. It turns to rot in your hands. And here is the other side of that same law. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, also creates a ripple. Every time you choose honesty when lying would have been easier, something in you grows stronger. Every time you open your hand when your instinct was to close your fist, something inside you opens too. Every drop of genuine goodness you release into the world eventually finds its way back to you. Not always in the form you expected, not always at the time you wanted, but always. The widow who walked away with empty hands and said only, "May God make things easy for you." She did not suffer the fate of the man who turned her away. She trusted in something bigger than the cruelty of her neighbor, and the God she trusted did not abandon her. This is the truth that the story of that village carries across time to reach us today. God is the best of witnesses. Every action is recorded. Not in a ledger that punishes for punishment's sake, but in the fabric of reality itself, which bends toward justice with a patience that outlasts every human scheme. You may think no one sees. You may think it is a small thing. You may think the darkness protects you, but the darkness is not empty. And the silence is not absence. What you give to the world gives back. What you release into the lives of others, life releases into yours. This is not a threat. This is a promise. Not a promise of punishment, but a promise of return. That nothing is lost, that every seed grows into what it was always going to become, and that the harvest of a lifetime reflects the quality of what was planted. So plant kindness, plant honesty, plant generosity even when it costs you something. Plant patience when your neighbor's field looks greener than yours. Plant trust that what is meant for you will reach you without you needing to take what belongs to someone else. Because a life built on what is truly yours, earned honestly, shared freely, tended with integrity, that life grows into something that cannot be taken from you, not by drought, not by time, not by any force in this world or beyond it. If this story reached something inside you, if it reminded you of something you needed to hear, then share it with someone who might need it too. And if you have ever made a mistake and wondered if it is too late to turn back, the answer this story gives is no. It is not too late. The village forgave. Life forgave. What matters is not how far you fell. What matters is the direction you choose to walk from here.